In the long list of strange incidents throughout U.S. history, no alien or UFO event has ever stirred global attention quite like the one that happened in the quiet little town of Roswell, back in the middle of the 20th century. Lies, rumors, and wild theories have been spreading ever since. But today, let's get into the real story, the one that came to light after years of secrecy. And once you've heard it, tell us what you think in the comments below. Roswell, just a small, sleepy town in New Mexico. Most people had never even heard of it. In fact, it was so off the radar that the U.S. government picked it as the perfect place to set up a top-secret base for launching nuclear missiles, right at the height of the Cold War with the Soviet Union. But then, something happened. Something no one saw coming. A mysterious event that flipped everything upside down and turned this forgotten desert town into the most famous UFO hotspot in the world. So, what exactly happened in Roswell? Let's rewind the clock a bit and listen closely, for the details make the story. About a week before the Roswell incident, on June 24, 1947, an American pilot named Kenneth Arnold took off in his private plane, heading toward Yakima, Washington. But halfway through the trip, he changed course and flew over the Cascade Mountains, hoping to spot the wreckage of a missing Navy aircraft. There was a reward, after all. While flying near Mount Rainier, Arnold suddenly spotted something strange in the clouds. Something shiny, metallic, flying about 3,000 meters high, moving at an insane speed, nearly 1,900 kilometers per hour. Back then, that kind of speed just didn't exist. Arnold instinctively chased after it, trying to get a closer look, and that's when the real shock hit him. It wasn't just one object. There were 9 of them. 9 metallic, disc-like objects flying in perfect sync. No wings, no engines, just smooth, flat, light-reflecting shapes, each one between 15 and 30 meters wide, gliding through the sky in a strange, wobbling motion, almost like skipping stones across a lake. Within 2 minutes, they were gone. Arnold was shaken. He scrapped his search mission and flew straight back to Yakima. The moment he landed, he rushed to the airport staff and told them everything he'd seen. His detailed description and the fear in his voice got everyone on edge. He said these things didn't look like any aircraft he knew of, and he was a pilot. They were round, flat, silent, and fast. People around him urged him not to stay silent. So the very next day, Arnold reported what he saw to the FBI and several government agencies, including the U.S. military. And just like that, the story exploded. News outlets picked it up. Headlines read, "Flying saucer from space." That phrase, flying saucer, was used for the very first time. Right there. People quickly split into 2 camps, those who believed Arnold saw something real, and those who thought he was just imagining things. But then came July 2nd, 1947. That night, a massive thunderstorm tore through Roswell, one of the worst storms the town had ever seen. And during that chaos, something eerie happened. The U.S. Air Force base near Roswell picked up strange flashes on their radar. No one knew what they were, but it looked like something was ripping through the storm clouds. Fast. The exact same flashes were detected at White Sands Missile Range, one of the biggest military facilities in the country. Even the nuclear test site, 145 kilometers southwest of Roswell, picked up the same bizarre signals, and all of them agreed. These things were moving way too fast. They'd appear out of nowhere and vanish just seconds later, right over Roswell's skies. Inside the 509th Bomb Group, Yes, the same unit that dropped the atomic bombs on Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Panic was setting in. That group was stationed right there in Roswell at the time. And with the fear that these fast-moving objects might be some kind of threat, the military was frozen, literally unable to respond because of the violent weather. All they could do was watch. Radar screens kept lighting up, objects showing up, disappearing, then coming back again, like they were silently watching the town from above. At the exact same time, Officer George Wilcox, based in Roswell, got a strange phone call. It was from a local resident, clearly shaken. The man told Wilcox that he and his wife had been standing by their window watching the thunderstorm, when suddenly they saw something flying across the sky, something shiny, oval-shaped, moving at insane speed. It zoomed right over their house and crashed straight into their neighbor's car, faster than anything they'd ever seen. But Wilcox wasn't convinced. He figured it was probably just some kind of optical illusion caused by the storm. So he calmed them down and hung up. But the calls didn't stop. Dozens of people started calling the police station, one after the other, reporting weird, glowing objects flashing across the sky, then vanishing before anyone could get a good look. Still unsure what was really going on, Wilcox kept telling people it was probably just planes from the nearby airbase, until he got one call that changed everything. Roughly 150 kilometers north of Roswell, in a wide-open farmland in Lincoln County, a rancher named Mac Brazel discovered something strange scattered across his property. It was a field full of shiny metallic debris, and not the kind you'd find from any normal crash. Now, with all the talk of UFOs in the news, Brazel got suspicious. So, on the morning of July 7th, 1947, he tossed a piece of the wreckage into his truck and drove straight to Officer Wilcox's office. He told the officer that he'd found large metal sheets, fused together, lying all over his land. And he was starting to think maybe, just maybe, it was part of a flying saucer, like the ones in the papers. When he showed Wilcox the piece he brought, the officer was stunned. This wasn't anything like the metal used in aircraft manufacturing, and Wilcox, with his military background, knew his metals. But this stuff? This was different. As Brazel described what he'd seen, the office phone rang again. It was a local journalist named Frank, calling to check if there were any updates. Wilcox told him about the rancher, the wreckage, the strange metal. But Frank didn't buy it. He told Wilcox it might just be parts from a regular crashed plane, and suggested he contact the military before rumors spread out of control. Wilcox agreed. He picked up the phone and called Colonel Butch Blanchard over at the 509 military base. And once Blanchard heard the story, he immediately escalated it to General Roger W. Ramey. The general wasted no time. He ordered a military intelligence officer to head out to the crash site immediately to inspect the wreckage firsthand. And then came the bombshell. The very next morning, July 8th, Frank the journalist got hit with a shocking headline. For the first time ever, the U.S. government officially stated that they believed they had recovered a flying saucer from outer space. Frank didn't wait. He pushed the story to the local radio station in Roswell, and within hours, it blew up. The front page of the Roswell Daily Record lit up with the words, "RAF captures flying saucer on ranch in Roswell region." This was huge. It was the first time in history an official U.S. agency acknowledged something like this. News outlets went wild. The story exploded through local newspapers, then spread to national headlines, and finally made its way around the globe. Like wildfire. people started connecting the dots between this crash and the strange sightings and witness testimonies from previous weeks and months. And suddenly, everyone was talking again about Kenneth Arnold and what he'd seen just days earlier. But then came the twist. By the end of that same day, everything changed. A press conference was announced, one that would flip the entire story upside down and spark decades of conspiracy theories. After the media frenzy and worldwide panic, General Ramey ordered the wreckage to be flown to his office in Fort Worth, Texas. Hours later, he faced the press, and with cameras flashing and microphones rolling, he told the world that it had all been a mistake. He said the earlier report was the result of bad judgment and government error. There was no flying saucer, no alien ship, nothing out of this world. What they found was just the remains of a weather balloon, used for tracking atmospheric data. To sell this story, they even published a photo of intelligence officer Jesse Marcel, the guy who had been sent to the crash site, posing next to some torn-up balloon fragments. The caption claimed he'd misidentified the wreckage when he first saw it. Was that really just a weather balloon? Or was something much bigger being covered up? A few days after the press conference, something strange happened. An official statement came out, this time from Mac Brazel himself, the one and only civilian who had actually found the wreckage. In that statement, Brazel suddenly backed the government's version of the story. He said the metal pieces he'd discovered weren't strange at all, and that he only thought it was a flying saucer because of all the panic and media buzz going around at the time. That confession changed everything. Public interest in the Roswell incident plummeted. Many people now believed the whole thing had just been one big misunderstanding. No aliens, no conspiracy, case closed. Even though the reports of strange lights and flying objects over the region didn't stop, no one seemed to care anymore. Throughout the 1950s, a few locals claimed they'd seen alien beings descending from the skies, creatures with huge heads and tiny bodies. But the government's answer never changed. There are no aliens. We've had no contact with life beyond Earth. But then, in 1978, everything came roaring back. A nuclear physicist named Stanton Friedman stepped into the picture and made it his mission to reopen the Roswell case. He started digging, interviewing people, hunting down anyone who might know what really went on. One of the most important voices he found was retired officer Jesse Marcel, the same intelligence officer who'd been sent to the crash site back in 1947, now older, retired, with nothing to lose. Marcel finally spoke up. He said he had always believed that the wreckage he saw in Roswell wasn't from this Earth. In his words, "The material I found was thin, crazy thin, but it was also insanely strong. You could hit it with a sledgehammer, and it wouldn't dent or scratch. You could hold a lighter to it, and it wouldn't melt. But the weirdest thing, you could fold it up like a piece of paper, and when you let go, it would spring right back to its original shape." Then he looked straight into the camera and said, "That metal was not from Earth, and Jesse Marcel wasn't the only one." Friedman kept digging and found dozens of former military members and local witnesses. Most of them agreed. What happened in Roswell was a massive cover-up, and the truth had never been told. Over the years, conspiracy theories exploded. Some claimed the U.S. government was hiding real contact with extraterrestrial civilizations, that aliens had super-advanced technology, and that America had secretly taken advantage of it, militarily and economically. But the story didn't stop there. In 1994, the U.S. Air Force released a brand new official report. And in that report, they admitted it. There had been a cover-up in Roswell in 1947, but, according to them, it had nothing to do with aliens. They said the wreckage came from a classified spy balloon, part of a secret Cold War mission. It was called Project Mogul. Right after World War II, the U.S. had launched this top-secret program to spy on Soviet nuclear tests. They used massive high-altitude balloons, each carrying advanced equipment and long metal rods with sensitive microphones, designed to pick up sound waves from atomic explosions. But when one of those balloons crashed near Roswell, the government freaked out. They couldn't risk the Soviets or the public finding out about the program. So they chose to float the story that a flying saucer had crashed. What they didn't expect was that the story would go viral. So they scrambled to reverse course, fast, and changed the story again. No saucer, just a weather balloon. And when reporters later asked why the back and forth, the Air Force replied that the Mogul project had been canceled decades ago, and that there was no longer a national security risk in revealing the truth. That wasn't the end of it, though. In response to the growing pressure, the U.S. Congress asked the Government Accountability Office, GAO, to conduct a full review of the Roswell incident, digging through every official record related to the case. And in 1995, the Air Force published yet another report, this time titled, Roswell Case Closed: The Truth versus the Myth in the New Mexico Desert. According to this final report, the balloon theory held up. No saucers, no aliens, no spacecraft. And those reports in the 1950s of strange-looking beings? They said those were just crash test dummies, made of aluminum, covered in fabric, designed for parachute testing at high altitudes. But were those dummies really just test models? Or were they used as a smokescreen to distract us from something far, far bigger? Years later, the Roswell story came back into the spotlight, but this time, the confirmation didn't come from a conspiracy theorist or a UFO hunter. It came from a respected figure, George Lonos, historian and curator of space history at the Smithsonian National Museum. Lonos publicly stated that all the drama surrounding Roswell back in the 1940s needed to happen. Why? Because it helped keep sensitive military secrets under wraps. He claimed that the flying saucer story might have actually been the government's best distraction strategy, something to throw the public off the trail of what was really going on. But not everyone was convinced. A man named Donald Schmitt stepped forward. He introduced himself as a UFO investigator, a guy who'd spent over 30 years researching the Roswell case. Donald wasn't buying the Air Force explanation or the official government reports. To him, they didn't make any sense. He asked one simple, but very sharp, question. If the area where the crash happened was so secret, so sensitive, then why would the government distract the public with a wild alien story? Wouldn't that kind of story attract even more attention? Wouldn't people start swarming the place out of pure curiosity? And he ended with this. If the government seriously believed that making up a UFO crash would draw eyes away from the truth, that's just dumb. That plan was either reckless or it was never real to begin with. His words sparked a new wave of theories, some even more bizarre than before. One of the most controversial came from a book titled Area 51, An Uncensored History. In the book, investigative journalist Annie Jacobson put forward a shocking hypothesis. The flying saucer that crashed in Roswell wasn't alien. It wasn't American either. According to her, It was part of a terrifying plan. Masterminded by Soviet dictator Joseph Stalin. She claimed her source was an anonymous engineer who had worked at Area 51 during that era. He refused to go public, but gave her the details off the record. Here's what he said. The Soviet Union had secretly conducted illegal medical experiments on children. These kids were deliberately disfigured, with oversized skulls, pale skin, and strange features. Then, they were flown in a top-secret aircraft into American airspace. The plane was intentionally crashed near Roswell, with wreckage designed to look like a UFO. The goal? To make Americans believe they were being invaded by aliens. To spread fear, chaos, and mass paranoia across the country. This wild theory strangely echoed something that appeared in another book, Roswell, The Untold Story. The author? The son of Jesse Marcel, the intelligence officer who had originally handled the Roswell wreckage. In his book, the son recalled a strange moment from his childhood. A night when his father came home from the crash site carrying a small piece of the wreckage. He didn't give it to the military. He hid it in their house. One day, the boy, just 11 years old at the time, picked up the strange metallic object and noticed it had weird writing on it. Symbols, letters, a language he'd never seen before. He was too young to understand what it meant. And just a few days later, his father quietly took the piece, and it was never seen again. By this point in the story, something had shifted. Most of the newer theories were no longer talking about aliens from outer space. Instead, they painted the Roswell incident as a giant political operation, a case where the truth was buried, behind layers of secrecy, deception, and distraction. In 2019, a new book hit the shelves, and it stirred up everything again. The title? Witness to Roswell, Unmasking the Government's Cover-Up, by researchers Thomas Carey and Donald Schmidt. The book read like a full-blown investigation. It included over 600 eyewitness accounts, from civilians and military personnel alike. One of those witnesses, the journalist Frank, the very first person to learn about the crash. According to Frank, when Mac Brazel went to the police to report the wreckage, he was absolutely sure the metal he found wasn't from this earth. And when Frank didn't believe him over the phone, Brazel grabbed the phone himself and insisted, "I'm telling you, this thing isn't normal. I've never seen anything like it." But not long after that, everything changed. Direct orders came from higher up. Everyone was told to shut their mouths. Days later, Brazel completely changed his story. He denied everything he had said before. Suddenly, he claimed the wreckage wasn't strange at all. But here's the weird part. His life changed too. Suddenly, he bought a brand new car, quit his job as a rancher, started traveling, got into business, and according to his own family, he was actually held in custody for a while after the incident, and wasn't released until he officially changed his statement. And Brazel wasn't the only one. People in town started saying that the military had warned them directly, "Don't talk about what happened, or we'll kick you out of your homes." That's exactly what the daughter of Air Force officer Hunter Penn claimed. She said her father once admitted he was in charge of enforcing punishments on anyone who leaked information about Roswell. And yes, he had permission to use force if necessary. But one of the biggest bombshells in the book came from a sealed letter, written by Officer Walter Haut, the same man who first told the press there had been a flying saucer crash. Haut left a final instruction: "Do not open this letter until after my death." When the letter was finally opened, What it said shocked everyone. Hout confessed that the photo of General Roger Ramey standing next to the wreckage was a setup. The real wreckage had been swapped out with pieces of a broken weather balloon and staged for the cameras just to calm the public down. Even crazier? Hout also said he'd heard from classified sources that the small alien creatures people were talking about were real, and he wasn't the only one. Brigadier General Arthur Exon and Tech Sergeant Herschel Grice said the same thing in their testimonies. And in 2008, one of the aircraft engineers who handled the wreckage came forward with a final revelation. Back then, I said it was just a weather balloon, but I was under threat. I can't stay silent anymore. What I saw was a strange craft. It had no engines, and even now, I have no idea how it flew. And the evidence doesn't stop there. There are dozens, maybe hundreds, of leads that contradict the official Roswell narrative. In fact, over the years, the internet's exploded with videos supposedly showing alien autopsies, bodies said to be recovered from the crash site, but experts later proved they were fake. Still, one question refuses to go away. What really happened in Roswell? Was it an actual extraterrestrial event? Or just another well-crafted lie by the US government? And that brings us to the end of the story. Or maybe just the end of what we're allowed to know. Because the truth, it's still buried somewhere. Caught between official reports, anonymous testimonies, and endless conspiracy theories. So, was Roswell the dawn of a new era? Or just a perfectly executed hoax? So convincing, we're still talking about it over 75 years later. Stick around for more. If you thought this story was crazy, you'll love the case of the Zanetti train disappearance. A chilling mystery that'll keep you up at night. Or check out the Dodelston Messages, the only documented case of real-life time travel. And don't forget, subscribe, like, comment, and share this video with anyone who's into mind-blowing mysteries like this one. We'll catch you next time with a story even stranger than this.